everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and this time you made me watch Hacksaw Ridge, a war film from 2016, starring, of all people, Andrew Garfield, a movie that was totally off my radar. I'm pretty sure I saw previews for this, but I tend to avoid war movies. It's just not my thing. I've never liked the aesthetic of the military fatigues and having to watch people go through basic training. And yeah, I think my thing is I just don't care for, and I understand the necessity of this, but I've never been entertained by having to watch people have to become basically a collective consciousness in order to survive and go into a battle situation. That's like a nightmare for me. And obviously, if I was in the time of World War II, I would probably find myself to some degree either wanting to go to war or feeling like so many men did, and like the protagonist Doss in this film does, a duty to go and fight for my country, to fight a clear and present evil. But given that I have never, experienced that, it just, there's a difference between what I would personally do in a situation like this and just how I feel about what I'm entertained by. Those are kind of separate things. I tend to resist movies like this. I'm so much about individuality and being allowed to be yourself and having personal freedoms and liberty that the idea of having to be part of a group where I'm just a cog in a machine and I have to totally fall in line, and the way that you have to be hardened in order to do all of that, I've never found that stuff, entertaining to sit through. This movie is like changing my mind to some degree about all of that. If every war movie was like this movie, it would be much easier for me to not just tolerate it, but actually kind of enjoy the experience. Now, that's not to say that everything about this movie, of course, is enjoyable, but I love a good character study, and this is absolutely that. This was requested on Patreon by Stone Gassman. Thanks so much to you for requesting this. I'm really glad somebody forced me to watch this. This is one of the wonderful things about this show and putting myself in this position is you can make me look at something that I probably would have resisted and never done, of my own accord, and I needed to see this. I think everybody needs to see this. I had a really powerful experience with this movie. I found it thrilling. I found it moving. I found it really poignant and important, and it hit me in a place. And I just finished watching it probably half an hour ago, and I'm still kind of reeling from the experience. I will definitely sit down and see this again. I want to show my wife this movie. She likes movies like this. She likes epics like this. And I guess I shouldn't expect much different from a director like Mel Gibson, who's made a lot of movies like this and who really knows how to shoot action, and in a believable and real way, and in a way where it's not gratuitous and the violence really matters. It's important to put yourself in this visceral place where it feels like this is really happening. And Gibson is amazing at putting the audience in the protagonist's shoes and putting me in the man's headspace. I can't imagine a more visceral movie than this. It's just brilliant. It's just wonderful. I could honestly end the review there and just tell everybody, if you've not seen this before, this is a classic movie. It came out 4.5 years ago, and I would have called it an instant classic had I reviewed it back then. I'm sure. I wish I'd seen this in a movie theater. I'm glad I have a pretty decent home theater set up so that at least I could see this on as big of a screen as I could put it on with a projector screen. But I found myself constantly verbally reacting in the battle scenes in this movie. But it's not just about making war believable. It's about this kid who is an individual and refuses to let someone get in the way of his convictions. And he wants to go to war, but he doesn't want to be a soldier. And he thinks it's important that he live up to his beliefs. And importantly, he doesn't judge anybody else. He thinks the war is necessary. He understands why other people are going in with guns and killing the enemy, and he thinks that it's his duty to be there as well, but he lives by the greatest of commandments according to the New Testament. He is all about love thy neighbor, and he follows the other commandments as well, and he tries to follow them as much as he can as long as they don't get in the way of that greatest commandment. It's kind of like the 3 laws of robotics a little bit, and I really like the way that pays off at the end. It goes without saying I'm feeling it. I'm going to put my sign up there, and then I'm going to keep talking about this movie a little bit. I will spoil some stuff here and there. This movie is based on a true story, and one of the only things I don't like about it is that it comes up front right at the beginning and says a true story. Not based on a true story, not inspired by, none of that, just a true story. And I watched this with Brandon, and as much as we were enjoying this and were enthralled and taken by it immediately, we took this seriously from the very beginning. We did find ourselves making fun of that a little bit, where something would happen that seemed maybe a little bit Hollywooded, or that you just couldn't know how it really went down, no matter how many hours of interview material you got from the people involved. And I do, by the way, really like that at the end of the movie, we get to see some of the real people involved, including Doss himself, from an interview that he did back in 2006. He died shortly thereafter, and sadly, of course, wasn't around to see this movie, made 10 years after that interview. But no matter how, I mean, clearly, this is based on a biography. There's a lot of interview material. There's a lot of details that they knew, but I don't think in a biopic you should ever say a true story. It's impossible to recreate events exactly the way they happened because, obviously, this goes without saying, people's minds are fickle, and nobody's memory is perfect, and especially with something very traumatic that happened a long time ago in the past, you can't possibly remember things exactly the way they happened, and your memory is very much impacted by telling the same stories over and over again, which I imagine at least some of the people involved here would have been doing throughout their lives. Maybe not, because these are, of course, like I said, traumatic events, and maybe they don't want to relive them, and some of the soldiers here would have only, and I don't know about Doss himself, would have only told the story, once or twice. I don't know, but if you come out and say a true story, you're basically saying you're presenting events exactly as they happened. And I find that distracting, and I find it, like I said, kind of unintentionally funny in moments where you couldn't possibly know. And there's places where it never feels gratuitous, the violence, and even some of the devices that are used, like slow motion. I think Gibson is brilliant at slow motion. It always it never feels silly. It never feels like a gimmick. It always feels like it's about slowing down time, because in that moment it would feel like time was slowed, and I really appreciate that. But there are moments like toward the end, there's a bit where Doss hits a grenade out of the air in slow motion, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how that happened. I don't know, maybe it was, and I certainly want to sit down and read the biography that this was based on. But with a thing like this, as I'm watching it, and I've done, of course, no research about what really happened, because I don't know anything beyond the 3 minutes of interview that we get at the end of this, when it turns into a documentary for just a couple of minutes. I just finished watching this, but I do want to sit down and read that book now. I am really curious about all of that. But man, as I'm watching it, I'm looking at this as a story. I don't care what really happened. I want to, just like with any cinematic experience, I want to be drawn into that world and get into the head of my protagonist or protagonist. And it's not important to me what the source material is or whether those things really happened. And when you upfront say this is how it happened, you're giving me your intent. Up front, you're telling me what your goal is. It's not to tell a good story, it's to present the facts, like what a documentary does. This isn't a documentary, this is a dramatization. And so I don't like that wording. It's kind of the only major thing I don't care for in this movie. And I have like a couple of other small criticisms, so I'll throw those out real quick, and then I'll get back into the character study of it all. The only other thing that I don't care for in this is, and I'm sure with a second viewing, this will not be as big of a deal. I have this with a lot of these kinds of movies where there's a lot of soldier characters, and everybody's wearing the same clothes, and a lot of them certainly look kind of the same, although the movie goes out of its way to cast a tall guy, shorter guy, somebody who has a really distinct and kind of odd-looking face. That guy is nicknamed Ghoul. Because everybody thinks he looks undead, and he's kind of ugly according to other guys around him. But it's the 1940s. It's a bunch of 20-something white guys all wearing the same fatigues, and the movie goes out of its way to make everybody as distinct and memorable as possible, and it gives them all nicknames, and they maybe had that in real life, but whether that's a happy accident or a choice on the part of the screenwriters and Gibson, it's smart because it helps me kind of put more memorable names to faces and remember who these characters are supposed to be, distinguished from each other. But when you're on the battlefield and these guys are getting killed left and right, and you have these kind of long exchanges after a battle where they're and really nice exchanges, just a brilliant script all the way around. There are a couple places where you'll have Doss and another guy in a hole, and they're just trying to cope with the situation at hand. And I don't always remember who the guy is that he's talking about from earlier in the movie. And I think the movie is working really hard to make it so that I will, but I'll just say there were places where I could not remember what characters were which. And there's also a medic, because again, like I said, this guy refuses to touch weapons. He goes through basic training, but he will not fight, and he will not even learn to fight, and he's there just to be a medic. And the army doesn't play fair with him. He nearly gets court-martialed over it. He's thrown in prison for a while. He's told that if he doesn't just go home, that he's going to have to go on trial, which he does, and that if he loses, he's going to be in a prison for the whole war. And the army, like I said, doesn't play fair because he's told that he won't have to be a fighter, that he can be just a medic and still go to war, and then he's not allowed to do that because his superior officer tries to force him. And somewhat understandably, in that particular situation, it's kind of more the higher-ups that are to blame for this, where his superior, of course, is afraid that if all of his soldiers don't have the same training and don't follow orders, that they don't have each other's backs, and you can't trust everyone in the platoon. Of course, classic battle stuff, war stuff. And so he is somewhat understandably put on trial and nearly gets court-martialed. He's called a conscientious objector, and he anyway, so later, when he beats the court-martial because his father gets a letter from a major up-and-up general or someone to colonel, I forget who, to let him stay in the war. He and his relationship with his father is fascinating. I'll get to that in a second. He is allowed in the war, and of course, he ultimately does more for the troops and for the war effort than any other single person there at Hacksaw Ridge toward the end. And he's with a couple of other medics that they find when they come upon a battle or a finished battle where a bunch of people died, like their first time out, and that guy does not get enough screen time. I took a long roundabout way to get to this other criticism, but he is killed off later, and it's a really sad moment. But for a second, I had to remind myself who that was supposed to be, and Doss does a lot of what he does. He saves a lot of people all by himself, but I would have liked to have seen the people that were also there for the reason he was, spending more time with him and get more of their perspective on why they were there, and if they thought about things the way he did, or if they if they also were fighting at the same time as they were trying to save lives, or exactly they fall there. Like I said, Doss's relationship with his dad is really interesting and really important. He's not born a pacifist. That all comes from real specific places in his background. We see all of those things. This movie really takes its time, and not in a boring way. It's 2 hours and 18 minutes. I could have seen this thing running 2:45. Like, considering how dense it is and how much of a deep character study it is, and how it's not rushing its pacing at all, it would have been fair, honestly, for it to be longer. And it's actually surprisingly concise, even at 2 hours and 18 minutes, for how much it gets accomplished. We get at the beginning everything we need about his childhood. We get everything we need about his relationship with his fiance. And I'm really impressed that we don't just get like a token scene or two with her, and then he goes off to war and we see her again later, but we've barely spent any time with her. A lot of things do that, where, a lot of stories like this, where the important thing is just there's a girl and he loves her, and and a lot of what he's doing is to get back to her, and that's it. They're in love, and that's all that matters. It's important for this story. This is one of those things where it's crazy that as much of this is real as it seems to be. From what little I know so far, it seems pretty authentic. Pretty true to life, and I'm gonna read about it and see how true to life it really is. But some of this stuff, it feels like, in one way, like you can't make it up, and in another way, it's the kind of, I don't even want to say stranger than fiction thing, but just like feels so much like it must have been a fiction. It's like, on one hand, you can't make it up, and on the other hand, it's crazy that it isn't made up. It's crazy that somebody didn't sit down and write this fictional story about a guy who gets in a fight with his brother when they're kids, and hits him with a brick or something and almost kills him. And that, combined with his abusive father, who became abusive because of his PTSD from war and hating himself and taking that out on everybody else and wanting to commit suicide, it turns this guy into a pacifist, gets him to a place where he refuses to kill or to even injure anyone, even in self-defense, and tries to follow the letter of the Bible. And then the guy meets a nurse, and she's doing what he wants to do, and that's partly why he falls in love with her. Like, everything about this feels like it must have come out of the mind of a writer, a good writer, but it all feels, I don't want to say manufactured, but just like a fiction, like a good fiction, and it really happened. And you gotta have a movie about this. Like this movie has to exist, because it's amazing that all of this happened. And then I think my favorite thing about this is you get toward the end, you have battle after battle, and it's never boring. I care more and more about this guy the closer he gets to death, and the more he sees all of these guys that he's come to care about falling around him, and he never stops and he never gives up, and it's that kind of movie. It's really moving, it's really inspiring, but it's never sappy about it, like, at all. And this guy, I mean, I'm loving this more as I'm talking about it. This guy, toward the end, breaks two of his cardinal rules for the rightest of right reasons. We learn early in the movie that his Sabbath is on Saturday, and he won't work. He won't fight on it, or not fight, but he won't be a medic on a Saturday. And he's asked toward the end, after he's saved like dozens of people all by himself on this ridge. Like, it's like watching Batman in an Arkham game, where you're like, how have you dealt with, like, how have you exerted yourself this much in one evening, and you've not fallen down unconscious or dead or something? And this inspires all of the remaining troops and other platoons, and there's another superior who comes to him who says, we have to have you with us tomorrow. These guys are not going to go back up to the ridge without you to rescue everyone else that they can. And he agrees to do it, even though it's on a Saturday, because he puts love thy neighbor in front of everything else. So he was willing to be court-martialed and spend the rest of the war in a prison and get a dishonorable discharge over refusing to hold a weapon. But the places where he will go against his convictions are when that main cardinal conviction would be violated, and that's just wonderful. And I love the moment. The other thing is, he won't touch a weapon. There's one place where he does, and I love this moment where he picks up a rifle. I do think it's maybe this is a minor criticism. I do think it's maybe a little bit gimmicky, where he picks up a rifle, and the way he looks at it for a minute, it's like the movie is trying to tease me to make me think that maybe he'll actually shoot someone with that rifle. I wasn't totally sure I quite bought the authenticity of that moment. It's a very, very tiny thing in an overall brilliant scene, where he will use any tool to save someone, because that's what it's all about. And so he takes this rifle, and he saves his his superior, the guy leading the troops, who, by the way, his general, or whatever his rank is, I thought that guy was dead earlier. I thought he had a death scene, and then it turned out that he wasn't dead yet. Anyway, but I think that's the guy he saves in this moment. He takes the rifle and he wraps it around a big tarp, and he uses it as a handle to carry this guy out. And I just love that. This has obviously some brilliant performances. Hugo Weaving is amazing in this as a surprisingly sympathetic but also horrible father. This guy who is very quickly humanized, and again, not in a sappy way, where I simultaneously hate what he's done to his son and completely understand it, and the way he redeems himself in that moment at the court-martial is wonderful. But he doesn't do a 180. He's not suddenly perfect. He's this really broken, messed up guy who is a drunkard, and who's violent, and has hurt his wife and hurt his children, psychological abuse, physical abuse. But he's a human being, and you understand how he got that way. And I mean, this is writing 101 stuff. This is how it's done, and this is textbook. And there are a lot of movies that I have to sit through all the time that don't understand this kind of basic stuff. So I guess I'm kind of patting it on the back and praising it for doing something that everything should aspire to do and doesn't enough. But it also is really adept at it. Like all of these characters come alive and feel like real people. so so he's amazing, and it's a part like I've never seen Hugo Weaving play. If this is not Andrew Garfield's crowning moment, crowning performance, I need someone to send me the link to the movie that is. Let me know what that is, because he's incredible in this. It's just he's captivating all the way through. It's amazing. I think I don't know right off the top of my head who he was up against for the Oscars in 2016. He was nominated, I think. Best actor for Garfield. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Sound Editing, and it only got Sound Mixing and Film Editing, so it only got technical awards. And it deserved those. Those are wonderful. This soundtrack, by the way, is incredible. Who wrote the score for this movie? This is Rupert Gregoson Williams, who is a name that's a name I don't recognize. What else has he done? Hotel Rwanda. Okay, so just a bunch of stuff I've not seen. Oh, wait. Wonder Woman and Aquaman. Interesting. Okay, Wonder Woman must be what I was recognizing in that score, because it was reminding me of something. That makes a lot of sense, because that's a World War I movie. This is a World War II movie. So he's kind of a go-to guy for these war epics. It seems like, but he's done a lot of other kinds of things that aren't like that either. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, so I imagine this was requested because it's Garfield in a totally different role than Spider-Man than I've seen him in anything. And I'm really glad I saw it. I haven't seen a lot of, like I said, these kinds of war epics that everybody always talks about, because they, I don't know, they tend to just be really depressing, and I don't enjoy them, and some of them are really important to see, certainly. This is one of those things that straddles that fence for me, where it did, it was gut-wrenching, but it's also, a really inspiring, ultimately happy ending by the end. I mean, this guy survived, and he made it to 87 years old, which is crazy. He died in the 2000s, and but it's also, difficult to watch in the ways that it should be. I've never seen things like Saving Private Ryan. Now I kind of want to finally break down and make myself do that. I have seen Apocalypse Now, and that movie will haunt me for the rest of my life. I've always talked about that, and how that's a movie that is not fun to watch, not supposed to be fun to watch, is important for everybody to see, and I kind of don't want to ever see it again, because I couldn't sleep for like 2 days straight after I saw that in high school. This course is not that experience, but I guess I'm just going on about why I don't tend to watch these things. I'm really, really glad that I did finally. This is, if not a masterpiece, it's a near masterpiece. I loved this. It's just absolutely wonderful. So anyway, I want to thank Stone Gassman once again for making me watch this movie. If you have something you want to make me watch, be it because it's crazy and you just got to see my reaction to the madness, or because it's something like this that you think is important and that I avoid because I'm a terrible film fan, feel free to go to patreon.com/geekvolution, jump on the $15 tier. You can pledge for just 1 month and get your movie on the list, or you can stay there and get in a rotation. We have several people there right now, so it is at least 3 months before between reviews from the same person. Right now I'm just doing these once a week, and there are at least a dozen people right now at that tier. I've got a big backlog, lots of stuff to watch and talk about that I'm excited about. You can request a movie, you can request a comic. Let me know if you want to do that, and I will get you on the list. And in the meantime, once again, I'm feeling it. This is a wonderful experience. Really glad that I got to share it with you. I'm Captain Logan, and I'll see you again next time.